Yesterday and today I did a few bits and bobs around Mark's house, ventured out for a run, and rehearsed a new anecdote, Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, in preparation for my upcoming gigs. Mark will return home tomorrow from Tominolines. Somewhat of a steady day. Mark dropped me off at Yorkshire Dance for a 3 p.m. until 4 p.m. rehearsal Studio 2 time of my debut burlesque act, The Ride of Her Life, in preparation for the Infaties burlesque gig based in London tomorrow evening. I returned to Hyde Park Terrace for 4:45 p.m, settled in for the evening. Isn't Rishi Sunak a cunt? I arrived into London via coach at 1:45 p.m. and made my way to the Duke of York pub for a bite to eat. I then took the busy tube to Gunnsbury for 4 p.m. I'll be performing as Hattie at the Infaties Burlesque contest based in the basement at the Gunnsbury pub. I borrowed a spinning swivel chair for the Ride of Her Life performance, which went down extremely well. I was on an elevated high post-performance. I didn't win the heat, but I was there for the experience and to soak up the enjoyment in an intimate audience. The one and only adorable Shelley Lace was crowned the winner. It was brilliant to meet a varied range of burlesque artists, whom shared their comedy, raucousness, provocativeness, and sultry creativity with a room full of open-minded souls. I fucking loved every minute of this evening. The event commenced at 8 p.m. and concluded at 10:30 p.m. The video of me performing The Ride of Her Life, based at the Carriage Works in Leeds, as part of the Aurora Nova Student Showcase 2023, will be also competing as an online application as part of the Behind Burlesque Infinities Limelight 3 event on Friday the 9th of February 2024. This evening's host befriended me on Instagram, Pharrella Mooncup, mentioning that she would love to book me for her gigs as she loved my act, which I will take upon her invite. I caught the 12:30 a.m. megabus service back to Leeds, arriving back into the northern city for 4:50 a.m. I settled in my flat for a couple of hours before my 8:30 a.m. until 3:15 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance on the following day. I'll be then going back to Mark's house until Monday. I returned to Leeds from Huddersfield via the bus this afternoon for my 5 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. I experienced the effects of a come down this evening due to the elevated ecstasy hysteria of my burlesque gig in London. It is normal for any artist to feel the numbness of worthlessness and depression after putting yourself on a pedestal to shrine your stance. The episode is temporarily, but it still fucks with your psyche until you feel like a hollow shell, teary, overcome, and lethargic. A mundane day shift at Yorkshire Dance. That place my depression has slightly lifted. This evening I headlined Getting Gobby in the Lobby based at the Lobby in Wakefield. I performed my anecdotes in the second half, including Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, Darling I've Become a Naturist, amongst others. It was brilliant to see Tim Brooks, the event compare, and many other brilliant familiar poets whom grace a mic in the Victorian decor venue. The event commenced at 7:30 p.m, concluding at 10:05 p.m. I caught the bus back to Leeds, which ventured around all of the fucking houses, returned home for 11:30 p.m. I worked an 8:20 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. Quite knackered. I returned to Aurora Nova's class this evening, 7 p.m. until 8 p.m, based at Dance Studio Leeds for commercial burlesque. We learnt Aurora's choreography to Sophie Ellis Bextor's Murder on the Dance Floor track. We shall be continuing with the routine at the same time next Friday. Returned back to my flat for 9 p.m. I received my marketing material via email for my forthcoming book through Troubadour Publications, a a couple of days ago. I accepted. I returned to London at 4:20 p.m. via coach, had a bite to eat, and then made my way to the Strong Room bar based at the Old Street by Tube for this evening's edition of Keynote Open Mic Film Night. I premiered my burlesque animation, Joie de Vivre, during the second half of the event, which was received well by the audience. A chuckle and a wolf whistle heard when my alter ego Hattie-Go-Lucky stepped away from the piano, donned in a long white gown, heels, stringlet and fishnets. Each filmmaker, including myself, introduced our short films in front of a sold-out audience when the compere Shiwi invited us to the mic. An interesting eclectic range of films showcased this evening, exploring comedy, life, emotional abuse and musical compositions. Bitterly cold outside. I returned to Leeds via megabus at 5:10 a.m. and caught the bus to Hyde Park Terrace, settled into my nightgown. Awoke at 11:30 a.m, caught up on my sleep. 3 p.m. until 4:45 p.m. I had a meeting with Emma Tregidden about a project titled Bones, Bodies and Beats, facilitated by Balbir Singh Dance Company. The project consists of 3 sessions on behalf of myself to create an animation fragment with Allerton Primary School to discover their personal identity of making a change to the world. It slightly resembles the Roots and Roots project. Min and Morgan joined in the meeting based up in South Space at Yorkshire Dance. I then worked an extremely quiet 5 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. shift with Sue, returned home via bus by 10 p.m. A sporadic day. I had a meeting with Ben at Open Source Arts in Leeds between 1:30 p.m. until 2:15 p.m. about my book launch for The Vision of Storytelling. The event has been booked for Saturday the 8th of June 2024. This evening, my animation, Joie de Vivre, was screened at Showroom Shorts based at the Showroom Cinema in Sheffield. Rob Speranza, the event curator, got the filmmakers up at the beginning of both halves, including myself, to speak a little bit about our projects. A good eclectic mix of films. A few people commemorated my animation, including a young woman named Dorcia, when I made my way to the train station in the Arctic blast of bitter air. Returned back to Leeds for 12:30 a.m. I spent today working on admin for my upcoming book launch, whilst working an 8:30 a.m. until 5 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance, in between mundane tasks. I then burlesque freestyled with veil fans, doting heels and my red Ann Summers nightgown for 45 minutes, post-shift, up in Studio 1. I attended a burlesque veil fans class this evening with Aurora Nova, based at Dance Studio Leeds. Titty Longstockings gave me a lift to 2 Hyde Park Terrace. My second visual book, The Vision of Storytelling, is ready to pre-order. I worked an 8:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. I then had a burlesque freestyling session with Sammy based down in the Studio 3 at the Dance Studios, Leeds, between 6 p.m. until 7 p.m, donned in my usual nightgown and heel attire to a slow cover of Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. I then attended the final commercial burlesque class with Aurora Nova, 7 p.m. until 8 p.m. Lovely to see everyone again. Returned home via bus for 8:55 p.m. I arrived into Blackpool via train at 3:07 p.m. to attend the Pleasure Beach Recruitment Day between 4 p.m. until 5:50 p.m. The ambience was completely different as a work ethic in comparison to being a visitor. I didn't like the environment as a possible employee, so I decided against my given role as a ride operator. The session was based in the W.G. Beans Cafe. I have so many various events arising for me, so it really wouldn't have been accessible to possible anyway. Viciously blustery due to Storm Jocelyn, I arrived back into Leeds for 9:30 p.m. I then caught the bus home. Busy afternoon from 1:35 p.m. I met graphic designers Min and Morgan, Barbie Singh Dance Company at the Thackeray Medical Museum to have a research visit as part of the Beats, Bodies and Bones project between 2:30 p.m. until 4:15 p.m. We didn't see the relevance that the museum had in connection to the project, but it was interesting to delve into the medical history from the 1800s through to the modern day. 5:15 p.m. until 6:15 p.m. I did a little burlesque freestyling based upon Studio 3 at Yorkshire Dance, using a piano and portable mirrors as a prop. I then had the burlesque veil fan class with Aurora Nova, 7:25 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. I returned to the Crooner Club open mic night based at the Wardroom from 9 p.m. until 10 p.m, where I performed 3 of my anecdotes, including Norman the Great, Burly Tycoon. It was brilliant to see the regular attendees again, including the lovely Kath, who has recently split up from her chap. She's keeping well, and always a pleasure to see the evenings compare Samantha Jane. A mature female vocalist who opened up her set with a rock metal number with a backing track, concluded her performance with an original, humorous a cappella about public dogging with her partner Brian. It was a shame I could only stay for an hour, but I need to be up early tomorrow morning for my visit to the Allerton CE Primary School for a creative workshop in connection with the Beats, Bodies and Bones project. A full day spent at the Allerton CE Primary School based in Leeds, partaking in a workshop for pupils as part of the Beats, Bodies and Bones project. The day consisted of 3 sessions where I opened up the creativity with my animation, Roots and Roots, to demonstrate what the current working project will represent when these concepts of identity, expression and change could relay through their reflection of climate activism. They illustrated a heart which rippled into imaginarium and the sensory of discovery their existence on the planet. A 20-odd minutes of exercise. Dancers Bobak and Trisha took over the session with the improv choreo that the pupils partook in. I perched producing visual sketches of their section. We bidded farewell to the school at 2:45 p.m. I caught the bus back into the city centre for my 4:45 p.m. until 9:45 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance with Jerry. Returned home for 10 p.m. I returned to London by coach at 2:45 p.m. I had a bite to eat before heading to the Hippodrome Casino, 5 foot, and my suitcase based in Leicester Square for this evening's edition of Burlesque Idol, staged downstairs in a lavish, classy bar named Lola's. I was the first of 7 burly artists that arrived at the venue. A showrunner named Grace showed me to the very small dressing room. We individually performed a tech run of our acts on the stage prior to the event commencing at 7:30 p.m. to a bustling audience. It was gorgeous to perform alongside these fabulous acts. One of the artists, named Love, a model-esque, tall black woman, mentioned that she moved to London from Derby to elevate her stardom due to Derby, quoting her quote, being a shithole. But the capital has blossomed her during the previous couple of months. I was the second act to grace the stage as Hattie, performing The Ride of Her Life. I had a fabulous experience on stage and throughout the evening, and overwhelmed by my first visit to an elegant casino. The winner of this evening's heat was Missy Hypnotic, and the runner-up being Powdered Sugar. A male cleaner in the gents' toilets mistaken me for a lady when I entered as Hattie. No, the ladies is next door, he panicked. Till then I flashed my flat heart-painted nipple, proving that I am male. He smiled. The judges Lolo Brow and Vicky Butterfly delivered captivating performances too. I headed back to London Victoria coach station via foot, passing Buckingham Palace and the purple illuminated London Eye in the foreground for my midnight coach back to Leeds. I arrived into the northern city for 6:10 a.m. I then caught a bus back home, settled in for my bed for a couple of hours before my flight to Cologne on the afternoon of Saturday the 27th of January 2024. I touched down into Cologne for 6 p.m, where I then had to catch an extortionate price taxi to the H&H Hotel based in Brühl due to the local transport strike. I settled in room 238 this evening, as I am feeling the lethargy of this week. A lovely room. Breakfast downstairs in the dining room between 8:15 a.m. until 9:15 a.m. I headed to Phantasialand on foot shortly before 10 a.m, arriving at the theme park for 10:45 a.m. Extremely busy today, with it being the final day of the winter Trom season. The weather was slightly chilly, but the piercing blue sky penetrated from the winter setting. I managed to ride all of the roller coasters, even Fly, a flying launched roller coaster which I couldn't find last year. A brilliant aviation experience. Taron, a multi-launched roller coaster, which is my favourite at the park, I managed to ride quite a number of times, even 2 magnificent night rides in the eager darkness. A lovely little firework display to conclude the season. I returned to the hotel with pizza and chips, settling in for the evening. Time 2:16 p.m. GST, and I am perched having a latte in Cologne-Bonn Airport, overlooking the runway. My scheduled Ryanair flight is due to take off at 3:35 p.m. to Manchester. I shall then be taking a train to Huddersfield, where I shall be stopping at Mark's house this evening. This morning I had breakfast downstairs in the hotel dining room, showered, and then checked out of the room shortly before 10 a.m. I then caught the number 18 tram into the city of Cologne, a latte at the nearby Das Cafe after recording myself reciting my anecdote, a biscuit or two, stood in front of the charismatic towering exterior of Cologne Cathedral. I briefly met a North Wales-based couple on the train back to Cologne-Bonn Airport, whom are chocolatiers of their independent company, Bavarelli's, both named Emma and Mark. Emma showed me examples of the beautifully artistically crafted chocolate egg designs, finished with a glossy marble presentation on her phone. A lovely couple. I arrived at Mark's house for 6:05 p.m, a rainy England in comparison to Cologne. This evening, I screened my animation Joey DeVivre at the short film Night 5, based upstairs at the Cardigan Arms in Leeds, to a sold-out student audience. A good eclectic variation of films on tonight's bill. Lovely to meet a Barnsley-based director named Harry Batty, whom screened 2 of his short, silent experimental films with a poetic ambience. The event was also a competition which I didn't know until my attendance. Brilliant surprise to see Joe briefly, perched downstairs with a pint and a book. This evening's event commenced at 7:30 p.m. and concluded at 11 p.m. I have been questioning myself as a creative recently, interrogating my instinct as an artist. I plummet into an undesirable oblivion of self-guilt whenever I step back from producing due to a busy routine. It is a mindfuckery intrusion which artists will definitely relate to. I arrive back at my flat for 11:15 p.m. I'll be commuting back to Leeds from Huddersfield via bus in an hour or so, as I am working a daytime shift at Yorkshire Dance tomorrow. I slept over here at Mark's house last night. I'm feeling quite poorly, body aches, sniffles. I may be run down. Yesterday, I had a 30-minute meeting with Balbia Singh about the collaborative project that I am working on, Bodies, Beats and Bones. I then sketched the Leeds minister for a good 25 minutes, sat on a park bench opposite the sanctuary. Two homeless men perched beside me, admiring my visceral sketch. "That is fucking incredible," one of the men complimented, holding a bottle of whiskey and apologising for his expletives. He mentioned that he could make a profit by selling my artwork for £10, which is slightly underwhelming. I burlesque freestyled up in Studio 1 at Yorkshire Dance between 4pm until 4:50pm. Mark picked me up from my flat at 6pm. 10:30am until 4:40pm, I animated the children's illustrations based up in the South Space at Yorkshire Dance for the Bodies, Beats and Bones project, collaboratively with Balbia Singh. The pieces are the drawings that the pupils produced during my recent visit to the C.E. Allerton Primary School. I animated a childlike hand elevating the globe, transitioning into a 2D composition of the globe rotating. The sketch accumulated into a visual by capturing the pencil linear lines forming as a representation. Morgan, Min and Eloy worked alongside me in the office. I worked a front of house shift 5pm until 9:30pm. Neil, the Renaissance Arts music teacher, briefly introduced me to a male cabaret performer named Luke, who works at the Blackpool Funny Girls Bar. Hopefully I'll be put in contact with Luke, as he mentioned that there may be possible auditions coming up. I was feeling extremely low this evening, not wanting to communicate or interact with anyone. When my cognition seeps into this spiral slide of depression, I start to have violent, intrusive thoughts towards the people I love and devote, completely opposite to the disturbing sexual imagery that visually perturbs me. The intrusions come in ebbs and flows, but it's the underlying roots of anxiety that prickles my sensitivity. January was quite an adventure for me, and my ambitious persona isn't settling down just yet. I returned home via bus shortly before 10pm. 12:10pm until 5:45pm, I resumed work on the Bodies, Bones and Beats animation, bringing the children's illustrations to life. I was based up in South Space at Yorkshire Dance. This evening I attended the Art of Striptease class taught by the wonderful Aurora Nova at Dance Studio Leeds from 7:25pm until 8:30pm. We learn how to provocatively peel away our silky gloves in a sultry, suggestive manner. I arrived back at my flat for 9pm. This week has been a rollercoaster simulation of elation and depression. I have been feeling so shit, spiralling into a surge of oppression. I am so tired. Moments have temporarily suppressed me from the mindfuck that's seeped in, but I think I am still on a come down, even though I have events scheduled. I am just wanting to strive as an artist and to be the best that I can be, but sometimes it is fucking hard to maintain a parallel wavelength. Last night, between 7pm until 7:35pm, I had a Zoom informal interview with a filmmaker named Hannah Moore, who saw me perform at Burlesque Idol a couple of weeks ago. We spoke about what life is like as a burlesque artist, and the contrast the genre differs from dwindling down a one narrow avenue of pornography due to the sexual striptease element. Burlesque is about the mockery of performance art, and for those who have invalid assumptions about arousing men through sexual gratification, is really not educated in society of empowerment and celebration. This is my anatomy, and I can present it in whatever fashion I want. 12:10pm until 4:40pm, I resumed work on the Bodies, Beats, Bones animation based up in South Space at Yorkshire Dance. I worked on my own. I rode a few rides at the Leeds Valentine's Fair on my way home, including a 132-foot spinning booster attraction. I arrived home shortly before 6pm, raining. My application wasn't accepted to perform at the Newcastle Burlesque Festival. Received news via email. Slight body aches, lethargic. I have been feeling incredibly depressed this evening, swimming in my own subconscious, not wanting to connect or communicate with people. Mindfuckery. I resumed work on the animation Bodies, Beats and Bones, 12:15 p.m. until 4:30 p.m, based in South Space, Balbia Singh's office. Mundane evening shift at Yorkshire Dance. Mindfuckery. Me and Mark checked out of the station hotel shortly before 11 a.m. We had breakfast at the nearby Ashley Hotel pub. Mark drove me around Newark-on-Trent, showing me to the past residences of his family before scattering his father's ashes on his mum's grave. We then had a walk around the historic town before commuting back to Huddersfield via car for 4:30 p.m. We had supper at Danny's house this evening. A day shift at Yorkshire Dance. I did break off between 12:15 p.m. until 3:05 p.m. as I had an interview at Swarthmore House, Leeds, to teach animation workshops, where I was successfully selected. The interviewees were Flo and Joe McLeod, the session taking place down in the lovely art studio. A 10-minute micro-teach was included within the interview, where I narrated my animation Man Bun live and explained the process and concept behind the creation. I had another ride on the 132-foot spinning booster attraction before returning to Yorkshire Dance. This evening, I attended Aurora Nova's The Art of Striptease, where we learned the elements of stocking peeling. Returned home via bus for 9:30 p.m. Bad headache. 12:15 p.m. until 4 p.m. I resumed work and completed the animation of Bodies, Beats and Bones, based in South Space at Yorkshire Dance. I then had a front of house shift from 4 p.m. until 9 p.m. I went to Mark's house this evening until Saturday. Mark dropped me off at my flat at around 3 p.m. Titty Longstockings picked me up from my flat at 3:20 p.m. to drive us to the Swillington Sports and Social Club in Leeds for this evening's edition of the Incredibles Burlesque Night in support of breast cancer. Each performer that graced the stage with their striptease magic were phenomenal. The courage and empowerment that some of the performers showcased, whom had an hysterectomy, was beautiful. You could feel their personal horrific experience through dance. A huge congratulations to Ivy Jack for producing this charity showcase. Over 120 audience members this evening. I, Hattie, was the penultimate burlesque artist of the evening, performing my act, The Ride of Her Life. A slight apprehension during the tech rehearsals when the swivel chair slowly careered down the slopey stage upon spinning. The actual act went perfectly during the showcase. Miss No Overalls was a fantastic host with her smutty humour and comedic stage presence. Titty Longstockings dropped me off back at my flat shortly after midnight. I caught the first of 2 coaches from Leeds to Bristol at 7:10 a.m, stopping off for a quick drink at the Travellers Tavern in London, Victoria. I arrived into Bristol for 4:10 p.m. I checked into the Airbnb house on Richmond Street, where I shall be staying overnight after dropping my suitcase off at the Cloak and Dagger venue, where I shall be performing burlesque this evening at the artistically weird event I'm Gonna Queer That Too, commencing at 8 p.m. and concluding for 10:30 p.m. I performed The Ride of Her Life and a provocative freestyle striptease titled Vaudeville Clown. It was brilliant to see a small schedule of varied acts perform downstairs in the venue's intimate space to a sold-out audience. It was lovely to meet the host, and Lightfoot too. I arrived back at the Richmond Street house at 11:20 p.m. The house owner, Ed Talbot, is extremely accommodating. I am sleeping in the ground floor front room. He lives here with his 16-year-old son. A nice getting to know conversation with Ted before checking out of his property at 9:40 a.m. with an Uber to Bristol City for a 10:30 a.m. Fleet's coach to London Victoria, and then London to Leeds from 3:30 p.m, arriving into the Northern City for 8:40 p.m. A couple of hours spent having a flat white again in the Travellers Tavern London. I received via email the PDF script for my second visual book from Beth Archer at Troubadour Publications. Apart from a couple of missing visuals which I am going to resend over the next day or two, the manuscript looks perfect. I arrived back at 2 Hyde Park Terrace for 9:15 p.m. 8:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. I returned to the C.E. Allerton Primary School to capture additional footage and audio for the animation segment for Bodies, Beats and Bones project. Bobak and Tricia conducted their workshops. Morgan, Min and Eloy was also in attendance. 4:30 p.m. until 4:45 p.m. I had an online discussion with the UN to discuss a possible opportunity of being an artist assistant for Paintville Creative Workshops based here in Leeds. This evening I performed my anecdotes, Norman the Great Burly Tycoon and a biscuit or two at the Cloth and Coal open mic based at the Petite resident venue in Morley, hosted by the wonderful poet Faye Marshall. It was brilliant to witness a brilliant varied poets grace a mic in front of a jam-packed audience. How lovely for Shelley Lace to come along and support me. I returned to Leeds via bus for 10:30 p.m. with poet Gareth Rhodes, delving into a brief conversation about ambition, success and overcoming the fear of failure. I feel incredibly knackered. Somewhat of a steady day. I was based at the Bradford Academy between 12:10 p.m. until 1:10 p.m, mentoring a young poet named Isabel Walker on her current commission Northern Poem. I was going to perform a couple of anecdotes this evening at the Chapel FM open mic in Leeds, but I have rescheduled for another date. Mark picked me up at 6 p.m. to go to his house. I left to Leeds with Mark this morning. 9 a.m. until 9:50 a.m. a further rollerblading practice based up in Studio 2 at Yorkshire Dance. I managed to master a couple of tricks. This evening I performed my anecdotes, Norman the Great Burly Tycoon and a biscuit or two at Freshly Squeezed based at the Cobalt Studios in Newcastle. Some talented artists graced the stage at tonight's open mic, including keyboard artist and vocalist Kirsty Hall, who was here with her young son. He was illustrating each performer and then handed them out when the event finished shortly before 10 p.m. I wandered around the streets of Newcastle and ventured over the Tyne Bridge prior to my gig, after having fish and chips at the Crow's Nest pub. A lovely city. I returned to Leeds on the 10:45 p.m. train and then a taxi home. I ventured out for a quick run shortly before midday. I then dropped some documents off at Swarthmore House for my DBS check. I forgot my tenancy letting agreement, so I'll have to give it in tomorrow morning. 2:30 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. I continued my roller skating practice up in Studio 2 at Yorkshire Dance, mastering tricks with a plastic cane prop. I then worked a 5 p.m. until 10 p.m. shift on the front desk with Sue. I returned home for 10:35 p.m. I dropped my additional DBS documents off at Swarthmore House shortly after 9 a.m. I then had a quick flat white at a Costa Coffee before more roller skating practice up in Studio 2 at Yorkshire Dance from 10:15 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. This evening was the first class of Aurora Nova's The Art of Cabaret 4 weeks course based at DSL. This evening we learnt the pose of showgirl presentation with our feet, arms and elegance. Last week we completed the final class of the Art of Striptease with a provocative striptease freestyle, having that tipple of liberation, especially concluding our individual routine with me doting a black leotard and jockstraps. I am going to keep practicing roller skating when I can, and even in skate parks if I'm able. I received my beautiful front and back cover for the Vision of Storytelling by email this afternoon. I approve the design to Beth Archer. I worked an 8:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. This evening, I performed my anecdotes, Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, I Always Seem to Break My Lent, and a biscuit or two at the LUU spoken word event based at the Hyde Park Book Club in Leeds, in the Snug Room. The first half was dedicated to 5 student poets competing in this year's Unislam based in Birmingham. The second and third act was devoted to the open mic section. The event commenced at 7:15 p.m. and concluded for 10 p.m. The venue was located just around the corner from my flat. A steady morning. Ventured out for a run shortly before midday. 1:30 p.m. until 2:45 p.m. Skating practice with tricks at the Hyde Park skate park. I commenced choreography on my burlesque act, Cheeky Chaplain, based in Studio 1 at Yorkshire Dance, from 5:15 p.m. until 6:15 p.m. I attended the second class of the Art of Cabaret Burlesque session with Aurora Nova this evening at Dance Studio Leeds. I met Mark for a hot chocolate at the wardroom prior to my studio practice. Titty Longstocking gave me a lift home for 8:50 p.m. Tomorrow I'll be spending the day in Leeds with my mum before my 5 p.m. until 10 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. A lovely day spent at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, and the big one was eventually operational. I rode the attraction consistently with my arms raised up in the air. I also rode Icon and the Revolution. The weather was pleasant too. I returned to Mark's house this evening. We are officially back together. I returned to Showroom Shorts based at the Showroom Cinema in Sheffield, where I premiered my animation Vertical Reality. I was the second artist to screen during the first half. Rob Speranza got each filmmaker up to speak a little bit about our films prior to the screening. One of the questions Rob asked me was, "What is your favourite roller coaster that I've ridden?" The big one. This was my first proper roller coaster at the age of 12 with my dad. I answered. I also explained that roller coasters are a physical serotonin outlet to heal myself and exercise my mental health. The event commenced at 8:30 p.m. I had to dash for my 10:31 train back to Leeds, arriving into the city shortly before midnight. A taxi home. This evening, I performed my anecdotes, a biscuit or two, and Darling, I've Become a Naturist at the Night Vision Open Mic Night based upstairs in the Belgrave Music Hall and Canteen, Leeds, during the second half. The event was a sponsored charity night in aid of the Brain Tumour Foundation. An array of wonderful poets graced the stage, including the two spotlight writers Naomi Booth and S.J. Bradley, whom read sections from their novellas. Great to see former poets Akil, Keith Fenton, and Gareth Rhodes, whom also took to the mic with their poetry. The event commenced at 7:15 p.m, concluding shortly before 10 p.m. Great to see Helen Donald, one of the compeers, who I used to work at the Leeds Playhouse with many moons ago. Between 5:15 p.m. until 6:10 p.m, I ran through my Cheeky Chaplain act based up in North Space at Yorkshire Dance. I met Mark for a hot chocolate at the wardroom at 4 p.m. It has been a steady day prior to this. I performed my anecdotes, Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, a biscuit or two, and Darling, I've Become Naturist, upstairs at the Terminus Tap Room and Bar based in Meanwood, Leeds. The event commenced at 7:45 p.m. until late. I left at approximately 9:30 p.m. as I headed to Mark's house subsequently. It was lovely to meet the host, George Earle, whom opened up the open mic with an acoustic rendition of Louis Armstrong's classic, What a Wonderful World. Good to see Rachel Elizabeth at the event, whom I briefly met at the Chemic Open mic good weeks ago. She performed tonight too. I'm going to be back and forth from tonight until Sunday, Leeds to Huddersfield, vice versa, as I have shifts at Yorkshire Dance. I am trying to fit in the time of seeing Mark when I can, as I return to London this Sunday coming to screen my animation Vertical Reality at the Kino short film Open bike night. I arrived into London Victoria via a Flix coach shortly after 5 p.m, imminently making my way to the Strong Room Bar based in Old Street by the Tube for this evening's edition of the Keynote Open Mic Short Film Night, commencing at 6:30 p.m. and concluding at 9 p.m. My animation vertical reality screened during the second half, and as always, each filmmaker was invited up onto the stage to introduce their short films. My animation was received well. An interesting array of films on the bill, including a gay erotic spoken word reel about dominating intimacy through fisting, created by Lee Campbell, titled Spoke Fist. A narrative presenting in explicit detail the provocative use of the fist term in homosexuality, with a voice repetitively questioning in the background, "Do you want me to give you a hand? Do you want me to give you a hand?" A woman with pointed features bowed her head into her right hand in disgust beside me. I chuckled. I subsequently returned to London Victoria for the 10:30 p.m. Flix coach service back to Leeds, arriving into the Northern City for 3:30 a.m. Last week was a quiet one, a break from my gigs. This evening, I returned to London for this evening's edition of Comedy Soup, based at John the Unicorn, Peckham Rye. I was the opening act of the second half, performing the ride of her life as Hattie-Go-Lucky to an intimate audience of predominantly comedians, staged upstairs in the venue. I had to provide my own spinning swivel chair this time, which was an arsehole to cart down from Leeds. The venue has kindly allowed me to store the item for a couple of weeks on premises. A good array of other comedians grace the stage, including the first act of the night being Colin Smith, whom stripped down to his leopard print thongs, smearing cottage cheese, butter, and amongst other delights over his hairy chest with a deadpan expression, delivering his distasteful ingredients to have perfect sex. I thoroughly enjoyed his act. Comedy Soup was hosted by Hot Rod and Alex, a pleasure to meet. The overground train back to London Victoria from Peckham Rye, and then the midnight Flix coach back to Leeds, arriving into the Northern City for 6:10 a.m. A good hour spent at home before setting off for Blackpool at 8 a.m. I arrived into Blackpool North shortly after 11 a.m, making my way to the pleasure beach via taxi for an afternoon of thrill-seeking, riding Icon and then the big one consistently. I left the park at 3:30 p.m. with the big one closing due to the wind. I checked into the Strand Hotel after having a bite to eat. I had a slight rest in the hotel before heading to the Bootleg Social Club for this evening's open mic event hosted by the musician Imogen Evans. I was the seventh act to grace a mic with my anecdotes on the National Express and a biscuit or two. I felt slightly intimidated due to the audience being in their late teens and early 20s, and the acts predominantly being alternative musicians, but my material was received well. An interesting evening. I returned to my hotel shortly after 10 p.m. I shall be returning to the pleasure beach tomorrow and also Friday for more thrill-seeking, despite whatever the weather will be. The time is 7 minutes past midnight, and there are two men having a dispute in the hotel room, both mine. Get to fucking sleep. A brilliant third day thrill-seeking at the pleasure beach, a consistent amount of rides on the big one. I am currently on the 6:19 p.m. Northern service to Halifax, where Mark will be picking me up. Hopefully I shall be paying off my outstanding balance of my second book to Troubadour Publications tomorrow morning. Despite a little rain, the weather today has been pleasant. I had an evacuation on the big one at the final break run yesterday afternoon, but happy that I got repeated rides on it. A Zoom meeting with Aurora Nova of this year's student showcase last night between 7:30 p.m. until 8:35 p.m. whilst in my hotel room. Applications to be sent out soon. A shift at Yorkshire Dams, 8:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. Extremely quiet, so so I produced an ink sketch titled Sand Dunes Overlooking Blackpool whilst perched at the front desk. A couple of hours snooze when I returned home. I am experiencing a slight come down due to a previous busy week. Quite tired. This evening, I attended Burlesque on Broadway with Aurora Nova at Dance Studio Leeds, 7:25 p.m. until 8:30 p.m, learning the choreo Macavity from the musical Cats. Return back to my flat for 9:15 p.m. A quiet day tomorrow. Quiet day. This evening, I performed 4 of my anecdotes at the relaxed event, the Poetic Off Licence, based up in the quirky candlelit room at the Watermark Bar Leeds. The event commenced shortly before 9 p.m, concluding at 11:30 p.m. I began with Norman the Great Burly Tycoon as I perched on a wooden high-rise chair behind a mic, and concluded with 30 pence to have a piss as I shook away at a tambourine. Great to hear other poets and musicians share their words in a chilled environment, and to meet new people. Interesting conversations about experiences of getting stoned on space cakes and pills. I remember the one and only time I got stoned on a little piece of space cake when living with Megan Andre. That was a mindfuck which malfunctioned my whole focus and coordination. I'll have to write an anecdote about it. I returned to my flat shortly after midnight. I performed 3 of my anecdotes, including I Always Seem to Break My Lent this evening at the Fenton Pub open mic based in Leeds. Slightly dire in public attendance in comparison to when I previously performed a few years ago. I was dog-sitting Penny at my flat today, perched on my bed, sketching away in my sketchbook. My mental health has been quite out-balanced as I have been off the medication for a good couple of days. I shall be picking some more up tomorrow. The element of feeling lost, unmotivated and undesired with life. I often feel like that I am not achieving anything out of my life, and that really fucks with the reality of succeeding and the intrusion of feeling abortion. I know I am not a failure. I personally earn the consistency of adventure and triumph, although this isn't as brittle as it felt when I was in my 20s. I'm only human. I worked an 8:30 a.m. until 2:15 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. I then visited Swarthmore House 3 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. for my induction of the building and to book in for my first animation teaching class on Sunday 19th of May with Flo. I have also been offered to teach a performance poetry and burlesque workshop at Swarthmore, which I completely agreed to. This evening I attended Aurora Nova's Burlesque on Broadway class at DSL, learning a chair routine to Roxy from Cabaret. Returned to my flat for 9:15 p.m. I mentored an 8-year-old poet named Alina between 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. at Litgate Primary School in Batley. I visited family whilst I was in the town. This evening I performed 3 of my anecdotes, including Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, with my yellow feather boa at OM Open Mic Night based at Archive in Leeds, compared by Robbie Falston, whom I worked at the Leeds Playhouse with around the same time as me. I did try performing Alicante Here We Come, seeing it was somewhat of a scratch night, but the verses fucked away from my cognition, and it was only an audience of 6 anyway. Wonderful to watch the few acts whom graced the mic too. One of Robbie's friends, named M. Kunazanka, kindly gave me a lift home. She works in a mental health hospital. I have been feeling incredibly fatigued throughout the day, just yearning to need the sleep. I caught the X63 bus service into Bradford from Huddersfield shortly before midday, heading to the City Library for this afternoon's edition of Bradford Writes, hosted by poet Nabila Ahmed. Nabila created this event for published poets to come and sell their books and perform. A lovely little gig based upstairs in the library. Great to see so many familiar poets too, including Laura J. Baldwin and Giovanni Ugarte. I was the second poet to perform 4 of my anecdotes, including Man Bun and a biscuit or two, concluding the set with Carol Ann Duffy's Havisham. I sold a few copies of my debut book, The Devil Makes Work for Creative Hands. I returned to Huddersfield for 4:30 p.m. This evening, I performed 2 of my anecdotes, including Norman the Great Burley Tycoon, at Out Loud Open Mic Night as part of the Huddersfield Literature Festival based at Small Seeds. The event commenced at 9:15 p.m. and concluded at 10:40 p.m. I befriended an Amy and Paula this evening, settled in with Mark subsequently. 12:30 p.m. until 1:55 p.m. was the Young Poets Laureate open mic event based in the cellar at the Lawrence Batley Theatre in Huddersfield. I had the honour to perform 3 of my anecdotes, including A Biscuit or Two, alongside Lens, Mohammed Salou, and the incredibly talented shortlisted school pupils as part of a National Literacy Trust, compared by the wonderful poet Shireen Elisa T. It was a treasure to be included in such a momentous opportunity to be one of the mentors, encouraging the next generation of poetic geniuses. Each young poet had their own distinctive tenor and personal observation in life. Me and Lawrence went for a coffee at Coffee Evolution before bidding each other goodbye. Returned to Mark's house, tea at Toby Carvery's, building a fucking bin cabin in the back garden with him in the evening, meaning Mark. It made me agitated and unimpressed. Steady day. I arrived into Gothenburg Laventa Airport via a Ryanair flight at 9:20 p.m. Swedish time, where I befriended 2 men, Miles and forgetting the other person's name, whilst waiting for the coach into Gothenburg City. I have flown here to ride the roller coaster at Leisberg theme park tomorrow. Miles is heading to the park tomorrow, mentioning we could do a couple of rides together. We passed the park on a bus, which I didn't expect to. The attractions, which were dimly lit, looked beautiful. I checked into the Hotel Viking accommodation shortly before 11:30 p.m., which was literally a station boat on water, docked. The massed exterior, radiant with lighting. The reception was closed, which felt dystopian, but I managed to self-check into my room 303, a basic cabin room, but lovely characteristic ambience to a 19th century boat. Settled in for the evening. Breakfast between 8:15 to 9:30 a.m. I then made my way near Leisberg theme park, so I knew my direction for when the park opened up at 3 p.m. I produced a quick sketch overlooking the entangled roller coaster tracks from Knorrskaden, directly opposite, with the busy dual carriageway beneath, the sun blaring down. I then had a walk around Gothenburg, producing a couple more sketchbook pieces before taking half an hour break back at the Barken Viking Hotel. I headed into Leisberg for 3 p.m, managing to ride all of the incredible intense attractions that the park had to offer. The amazing turbulent Mack roller coaster Helix to Valkyrie, the 164-foot dive coaster, and the intense wooden coaster Balder. I also experienced Atmosphere, the 380-foot drop tower located nearby the entrance to Helix. Phenomenal. I met up with Miles for a good few hours to lap the rides with him. We even went on a walk through Horror House, which exceeded my expectations of it being uneffortless. The dark attraction definitely propelled my inner fear. I managed to experience a good few night rides too, particularly on Helix. I returned to the hotel shortly before 11 p.m. The time is currently 9:20 a.m. Swedish time, and I am perched on a stool at Gothenburg Ladenta Airport, overlooking the runway. I had breakfast in a hotel this morning before catching a Flix coach from Gothenburg Terminal bus station to the airport. My Ryanair flight will be departing at 10:50 a.m. to Manchester Airport, and then a train to Huddersfield, returning to Mark's house. A brilliant day had, Thrillseeking at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Plenty of consistent rides, particularly on the big one. I checked into the Seaview Hotel shortly after 5 p.m. Basic room, but it is only for one night. This evening, I performed 3 of my anecdotes, including Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, at the FY4 Waterloo Open Mic Night based at the Waterloo Music Pub, also in Blackpool, hosted by the young musician Imogen Evans. Lovely to see her dad again too. A varied bill of musicians graced the stage in the eclectic, charismatic venue, decorated with prolific alternative rock memorabilia and posters. Quite an amiable audience turnout too. A random old man entered the venue playing his harmonica whimsically before leaving during a duo act. It is good old Blackpool after all. I left the venue shortly before 10 p.m, returning to my hotel. Weather was pleasant also today. I caught the National Express delayed 8:45 a.m. coach from Blackpool to Leeds, changing at Manchester, arriving into my final destination at 1 p.m. The coach alternatives is because of the fucking train industrial strikes. They haven't got enough money apparently, as quoted by the coach driver. I looked after Penny at my flat this afternoon. Tonight, we drove to Peatley Parva based in Leicestershire, Mark, to our beautiful Airbnb accommodation, where we will be stopping overnight. Our arrival time shortly before 10 p.m. Tomorrow, I shall be collecting my new published art book, The Vision of Storytelling, from Troubadour Publications, based in Market Harbour. Extensive detouring today. A coffee at a small, quirky post office based in Gilmorton shortly before midday, perched outside in a piercing sun. At 12:30 p.m, we was at Troubadour Publishers just outside of Market Harbour to collect my new book, The Vision of Storytelling. I met with a few of the publication team, sat down in the conference room with Mark and Penny, where I was given my beautiful new hardback book. The overall result and presentation is absolutely sterling. The team have completed an amazing project. I cannot thank and praise them enough. I mentioned that I shall definitely be working with them again on future proposals. It was lovely to meet with the warehouse operator named Dave too, whom wheeled 2 boxes of my books to the car. Now, time to distribute to potential buyers. Mark dropped me off at my flat shortly after 6 p.m. Mark has been incredible too, my loving, compassionate soulmate. I will be working a daytime shift at Yorkshire Dance tomorrow, and then to Mark's house until Monday. The week commencing Monday the 13th of May 2024 was quite a productive week. I was based at the BTM Centre in Bradford for 4-hour day animation workshops, teaching 3 groups the art of animating. Monday, a special needs group, Tuesday, a deaf group, and Wednesday, a mental health group. Each group was small, but such a creative bunch. I dropped a copy of my new book off at Mune and Murrell's house based in Morley on the Wednesday evening. I stopped for a quick cuppa and a natter. I visited family on the Thursday, also dropping 2 copies of my new book off with Grandad and my mum. I worked an 8:30 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance on the Friday, subsequently watching Saskia Roy in a 20-minute contemporary dance piece at Leeds School of Arts. 5 p.m. until 5:20 p.m. I had a Zoom online interview with P. English Literature, promoting my new book, as I perched at the unorganised table in my flat. The interviewer was based in Africa. Lovely to speak and delve into all things creative with him. Mark picked me up at 6:10 p.m. to go to his house for the weekend. I'll be continuing with the animation workshops Monday to Wednesday next week too, during the same hours. Mixed flavours of emotion surface too. The experiencing of a slight come down, pressure and lethargy weaving in and out of my cognition. A feel of surrealism also. Adding to the previous evaluation of the week, I am experiencing the ailment and imprisonment of financial predicaments and the unambitious attitude of trying to be optimistic. I am heavy-eyed and slightly depressed, and I can channel the oppressiveness, energy of what others are feeling. Then the pressure environment of trying to justify any goodwill as an artist. It's just a mind fuck. that has been battling with my sensitivity for a while, on and off. The beginning of spring has felt like being a burden on everyone else, even though the respect will be eventually paid back in due course. It is like walking on my own eggshells, really. Steady morning. 1:45 p.m. until 4:45 p.m. I had my first artist assistant with Paintmine, based at Revolution, Millennium Square, Leeds. The lead ceramic artist being Becca, who drove from Manchester, Katie being my second assistant. The group worked in graphic and social media advertising. This session of clay modelling was their wind-down, sip and paint activity after a training morning about artificial intelligence. It was a good little shift assisting, even though butter and breadsticks was for tea for me on my 5 p.m. until 5:45 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance, because I am poor. I allowed Rose to the pub to have a drink with dancer Gary Clark whilst on shift. I have passed caring about Yorkshire Dance, to be perfectly honest with you. Home for 10:15 p.m. My new art book, The Vision of Storytelling, is officially released today. I had a good but rainy day spent at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. A couple of rides on Icon, but consistent rides on the big one, which turns 30 years old today, but the park didn't celebrate the attraction's milestone. Returned to Mark's house this evening. He kindly picked me up from Halifax train station at 8 p.m. I returned to Leeds via train this morning for my 8:40 a.m. until 5 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. This evening, 7:25 until 8:25 p.m, I had my first burlesque group performance course with Aurora Nova at Dance Studio Leeds, and will continue every Wednesday until the showcase based at the Carriageworks Theatre on Saturday the 10th of August 2024. The choreography will be in line with red robes, bra, knickers and black shoes attire, dancing to an instrumental bump and grind number and Feeling Good by Muse through cheeky, sultry moves and striptease. Aurora mentioned that there will be nipple tassel twirling, but not as showgirl as last year. I'm looking forward to it. This week was all about the methodicals of the opening choreo, and then resuming next week will be about linings. I am going to take it easy tomorrow after an active few days, but it'll be meeting Lawrence in Headingley in the late afternoon, and then getting into the studio at Yorkshire Dance for a practice run of my upcoming Cheeky Chaplin burlesque act, in preparation for the Level 2 solo mentoring course with Aurora Nova, starting this Friday evening, and every consistent Friday right up until the 10th of August 2024. This course is all about act development, so I believe that we will be sharing our acting progress to the Level 2 group this Friday. I will be keeping a record of these sessions, but I shall be keeping entries, particularly on my studio sessions, as I did previously last year. I haven't practiced with this act in over a month due to travelling and gigs, but the routine is velcroed in my psyche. 8:15 a.m. until 5:20 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. A nice 6:30 p.m. until 9:40 p.m. Level 2 solo act development with Aurora Nova at DSL, mentioned in my previous entry, where we presented our progressing acts as a group. It was brilliant to see the three other soloists express themselves through vulnerability, comedy, and personal attributes to the artistry. I was the final performer to show my Cheeky Chaplin act on roller skates to the group, but without so much of a striptease element, due to tailoring poppers onto my costume. I had a little giggle when Aurora asked what a WMC social club was, as we don't have them in Australia. I mentioned that it's where tradies go to socialise. Majority of them are drunk by the third act, shouting, "Get your tits out," Sino de Bias added. Aurora stated that it really was not her vibe. It was just the whole aura of the conversation. The last couple of hours of the session was a sitting discussion about our ambitions, goals and directions as a burlesque performer. Quite inspiring. I went to Mark's house tonight. I returned to the BTM venue in Bradford for the animation workshops this morning, concentrating on the editing process where there were technical difficulties, but it was okay. I'll be here at the centre tomorrow and Wednesday, concluding the session. This evening, between 7:30 p.m. until 10 p.m, I had a small tech run for my book launch on Saturday, based at Open Source Arts in Leeds, with me, Scarlett von Siren, whom will be performing a sexy, provocative biker act with glitter or lube, and black cross tape to cover her nipples. Tati Taboo was present, and pianist Adam, who will be performing an instrumental melody to my animation Joie de Vivre, whilst I will deliver the live vocals, doting my white long gown in a provocative manner. Phil Markin, the venue manager, helped me with a small technical setup. It was great to see him too. I returned to my flat for 10:30 p.m, knackered. I'll be working an evening shift at Yorkshire Dance tomorrow night. Exhausted. I worked an 8:30 a.m. until 2:20 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. 1 p.m. until 1:35 p.m. I had a one-to-one Zoom meeting online with Aurora Nova, discussing my developing solo act in South Space. I rehearsed for my 1 hour last night on the act, based up in Studio 1 prior to the Burlesque group rehearsal class at DSL. This evening, I performed 4 of my anecdotes, including Norman the Great Burly Tycoon and On the National Express, at the Lost and Found Open Mic Night in Leeds. The venue is an extravagant, charismatic, spacious building with sterling interior. Anyone would mistaken it for the Ritz due to its pure elegance. This evening was hosted by a quirky comedian named Katie, doting a bedazzling pink attire and pastel pink hair, a larger-than-life character. Lovely to meet with Castleford-based poet Jacob Davis, whom also performed this evening. He will be publishing also with Troubadour Publishing, like myself, in November. A nice varied bill of musicians and comedians too, including a sex worker comedian who doted a pigeon mask, delivering stories about her and her male client running around a 5-star hotel, portraying pigeons as roleplay, whilst the male client was making innuendo remarks like, "I can't wait to put my beak in your seed." Anything goes at an open mic night. The events commenced at 7 p.m. and concluded at 9:30 p.m. I returned home for 10 p.m. The Vision of Storytelling book launch commenced at 7:20 p.m, based upstairs at Open Source Arts in Leeds, featuring an eclectic varied artists exploring genres of sultry, comedy, burlesque, music, spoken word, animation, in celebration of my second book release. This evening was venue managed by illustrator Jackie and captured through the creative lens by the wonderful Dawn Kilner. I doted silver heels, waistcoat, yellow tie without a shirt, and a quirky patterned trousers. I opened up the evening with Norman the Great Burly Tycoon, whilst Alvin Rocket performed a keyboard melody followed on to a biscuit or two, asking the audience what their favourite biscuit was. I then answered that a biscuit is always better crumbled on my body so someone can lick it off. It was brilliant to provide the carpeted stage to local grassroots artists such as Burlesque artist Albie Damned, Bunny von Battenberg, Tati Taboo, Scarlett von Siren, Ivy Jack, Zini Audi Boyce, Lady Gemstone, poets Lance and Tom Priestley, musicians LORT and Alvin Rocket. I performed the ride of her life as Happy-Go-Lucky, concluding the event semi-naked, performing Darling, I Have Become a Naturist, exiting the stage, walking away nude. The event ended shortly after 10 p.m. I was decorated in Scarlett von Siren's black glitter, with Lady Gemstone poured onto me, prior to my final anecdote. An inspiring evening which I have vowed to reprise again at the end of this year sometime. A huge thank you for Mark coming along to support me. Brilliant to see Karen again too. A few books sold too. I helped Jackie clean the venue post-performance. Me and Mark arrived at his house at 12:45 a.m, straight to bed, and made out. Tomorrow a chill day. Afternoon at Danny's house. Sunday roast at the Beaumont Arms at 4 p.m. I am tired by the stressful, fucked up politics of life and the yearning to motivation and stamina in order to rein up the next project. I am also not in the mood to be conversational. 11 a.m. to 11:40 a.m. I had a pre-recorded interview with Peter Spafford talking about my new book and performing a few of my current anecdotes for Love the Words based at Chapel FM, Seacroft, Leeds. Hot chocolate at a Cafe Nero in the city. 5:15 p.m. until 6:10 p.m. I practiced aspects of my cheeky chaplain burlesque routine. Studio 1 at Yorkshire Dance. Burlesque group showcase rehearsals at DSL with Aurora Nova, 7:25 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. I slept overnight at Mark's house. Various mixed emotions throughout the previous few days, significant to a come down, but the only healing mechanism to aid this is to accept, soak it up, and process. 12 noon until 4:15 p.m. I hosted the Beeston Arts Festival in Leeds, the arena stage, introducing various youth dance groups to the slightly raised platform. Lovely weather too. Between 7:15 p.m. until 10:15 p.m. I hosted Blur the Lines based at the Hyde Park Book Club, also in Leeds, welcoming incredible artists to the basement stage, curated by the brilliant Lawrence. Fabulous to see an array of diverse, humorous and thought-provoking poets splurge their sincerity to such a receptive audience. I performed my anecdotes, a biscuit or two, and a tambourine version of 30 pence to have a piss during the showcase. Lawrence delivered a captivating performance too, and produced, yet again, a fantastic edition of Blur the Lines. A little socialising post-event before returning to my flat shortly after 11 p.m. I'll be going back to Mark's house tomorrow morning. Friday the 21st of June evening, we presented our burlesque solo acts to Aurora in the evening class. I have completely changed my cheeky chaplain act. Although I am keeping with the roller skates concept, I have included more of his slapstick, witty mannerisms and poses. I still need to work on the striptease elements. Sunday will be a chilled one. A good, busy, but warm day spent at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. I shall be returning to Mark's house this evening. I caught the 11 a.m. National Express coach to Bristol, changing at Birmingham. I arrived into the southern city at 5:15 p.m, making my way to the Bristol Fringe pub with my large suitcase and half-dismantled swivel chair. I forgot the nails to put together my chair, but a last-minute aid of gaffer tape solved the predicament. I performed The Ride of Her Life as happy-go-lucky as the opening performer of the second act at this evening's edition of Not Being Fringed, produced by the lovely Casey Suitcase, whom kindly put me and the compere Crumpet up for the evening at her house. A small cast of comedy, sultry, provocative and risque acts that grace the stage in the back room of the pub, including Tilly Poison, who showcased the sexy act of head trauma, aiding herself with a cup of paracetamol and a nail up her nose as she graced the stage in a provocative lingerie. It was brilliant to meet a handful of diverse performers too. A fun evening accomplished. Casey drove me and Crumpet over the towering Clifton Bridge on the drive to her house, which is just outside of Bristol. Another warm day today. Casey Suitcase dropped me and Crumpet off at a bus stop to get the bus into Bristol city centre. Lovely to connect to them both, such incredible artists. Crumpet runs her own burlesque night in London, although she is taking a little break due to feeling slightly run down. I hugged Crumpet goodbye in the city centre and called for 10 a.m. National Express service back to Leeds, changing at Birmingham. I arrived into the northern city for 4 p.m. A couple of hours rest at my flat before attending the burlesque group performance rehearsal this evening. Returned back at my flat for 9:30 p.m. 12 noon until 2 p.m. based upstairs at the Boogie Woogie Bagel Bar in Wakefield was this afternoon's informal intimate edition of Jackanory,
where I performed 5 of my anecdotes, including a biscuit or two. Halima hosted the event. I sold 2 copies of my new book release. Lovely to see Caroline, Zara Sophia and her mum having a giggle downstairs in the venue. Returned to Huddersfield via bus for 4:15 p.m, meeting Mark at Danny's house. Last night, in the Level 2 Solo Burlesque Development class with Aurora Nova at DSL, we presented our acts to the group. My cheeky chaplain act has ripened from the day I birthed the creation. I am focused 8% on Chaplin's prominent mannerisms on foot and 20% on skates. I have been feeling quite lethargic about the previous few days of travelling and performing, but my mental health has been counterbalanced. Back at Mark's house in the evening.
A day spent at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, blustery and rainy. I managed to have one ride on the big one before the attraction closed due to adverse weather conditions. I rode a few of the other attractions as contrast of what I would normally experience. I checked into the Maiden Hotel at around 5 p.m. A small online meeting about the autumn programme of the National Literacy Trust, poetry workshops in schools at 5:30 p.m. with Shireen and Lisa T, as I laid half-dressed naked on the bed, chilled in the evening. Coffee and toast down in the hotel dining area prior to checking out. The hoteliers also took me to the empty adjacent hotel, which they also owe, to show me an array of cabaret costumes that their gay friend are selling, along with sewing machines. I admired the untouched interior of the hollow premises. A couple of hours spent at the Pleasure Beach, where I managed to ride quite a few attractions, but unfortunately no the big one, due to the supposed wind. I am currently on the 1:19 p.m. train to Leeds from Blackpool North. I'll be working a 5 p.m. until 10 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance this evening. I woke at 10:35 a.m. I must have needed a sleep. I run between 12:15 p.m. until 1 p.m. Practiced on my developing act, Cheeky Chaplin, based up in Studio 2 at Yorkshire Dance from 2:30 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. Returned to my flat for a while before the burlesque group practiced from 7:25 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. without Aurora, with it being homework week, which was slightly chaotic and certain people wanted to be the dance captains. The opening routine came together in the end. Ruth kindly gave me a lift to Huddersfield, where Mark picked me up from the town centre. Slept at his house overnight. The time is currently 6 p.m. and me and Mark are sat in the hotel lobby. We will be going out for something to eat shortly before our coach picks us up between 7:50 p.m. until 8:20 p.m. to take us to Cos Airport. Our flight back to Leeds with Jet2 will be at around 10:55 p.m. It has been a day of waiting around, but we've had a lovely chilled holiday. A delicious breakfast at Hannah's restaurant this morning. I'll be back in the studio tomorrow at Yorkshire Dance, resuming practice on my cheeky Chaplin act in preparation for the showcase next week. I will be purchasing the remainder of my costume too, but I am ready and equipped for the show at the Carriage Works in Leeds on Saturday the 10th of August. Resumed work on my current animation up in my room in the morning. This afternoon I hiked up to the rocky summit of Salisbury Crags on the rise of West Holyrood Park, a phenomenal perspective of Edinburgh and beyond, with vibrant high winds racing at your face. I could definitely feel the push of G-force battling in my face. I produced a visual sketch whilst up at the summit. The hike definitely challenges your ability, momentum and stamina, and the drive to succeed. I returned to Paul Coles at 3:45 p.m, a bite to eat, and then a rest for a couple of hours. This evening I performed the ride of her life for the final time at All Stars Burlesque to a full but quiet crowd. It has been such an honour to have had the opportunity of performing as Happy-Go-Lucky at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival and meeting various beautiful artists. Hopefully I'll be able to do this festival all over again next year. I'll be returning to Leeds via coach tomorrow morning, and then a meal with Aurora Nova and the Level 1s and 2 soloists
at Live in Italia at 7 p.m.
A Monday 9:15am until 5:15pm shift at Yorkshire Dance. Headache this evening. Slept for a couple of hours when returning to 2 Hyde Park Terrace for my final night. Tomorrow I'm moving to Mark's house in Huddersfield. I had to let Joe's son Steph in the house at 1am when forgetting his keys, drunk. A group of his friends with him back from a wedding. I thought I heard the front door ringing. I initially couldn't sleep. I have been consistently travelling since 8am. Huddersfield to Leeds, Leeds to London Victoria Coach Station, and then to London Stansted Airport, where I flew to Helsinki at 6pm via Ryanair, landing in the Finnish country shortly before 11pm. It is 2 hours in front here in comparison to England. I caught the 20-minute train from the airport to Martinlaakso, where I will be staying in a beautiful apartment for the night before commuting to Jyväskylä tomorrow morning for my international debut performance as Happy-Go-Lucky at the Sweet Finnish Burlesque Festival. I'll be sleeping soon. I arrived in Jyväskylä at 1:45pm via train from Martinlaakso, changing at Tiro. I walked to the Ilkevo venue, a 20-minute on-foot commute with my suitcase, arriving at 2:05pm. The Sweet Finnish Burlesque Festival was held downstairs. I met with lovely performers, hosts and organisers of the festival. I was shown through to the dressing rooms, where I made myself up as Happy-Go-Lucky shortly before the doors opened at 6pm. Tech rehearsal went well. I checked into an apartment on the town nearby between 4pm until 5pm. A forest-themed apartment with decor, woodland, furnishings and pine tree branch assortments around the light fittings. Distinctive. I was the third artist to perform the ride of her life to an enthusiastic audience, cheering and applauding in unison. I admired every second of the experience of my debut international performance on stage. I had the chance to watch the other acts express their artistry this evening and join in the tech rehearsals. I bonded with them all, the incredible acts such as the Australian-based Rosalind Rouge, London-based Miss Rose Rennie, and the wonderful El Rhino poet. Mr. Victor Victoria succeeded in a sterling performance, doting a fabulously decorated rhinestone blazer and tie with leather knee-length heels. Everyone is fucking awesome. The venue is part of the Jyväskylä University through a consistent staggered row of Scandinavian birthed trees and hilly woodland. Quite lukewarm is the weather for this time of the year. I returned to the apartment shortly after 11pm. I facilitated the animation workshop based at the BTM Centre in Bradford, 10:30am until 2pm. This evening I performed a live recital of my animation, The Brain Has Turned to Dust, followed on to the Black Hole animation which I created for Miles and the Chain Gang, a tall wax and doll wick based upstairs at the Midnight Bell in Leeds. The event commenced at 7:30pm, curated and hosted by the lovely Jade Jefferies. It was so good to see her again after a long hiatus. Great to see Lawrence and Lisa too, whom attended the event. Lisa read a poem too. Lovely to meet with and listen to original songs performed on electric guitar and keyboard by Eade, exploring the intimate experiences of self-discovery and rape through her eccentric vocal ability. Great to see and hear the gothic poet Rhiannon Sky also. After a long day of feeling incredibly exhausted, I returned home for 11pm. Again, I facilitated the animation workshop at the BTM Centre in Bradford with the help of Sam Allen at 1pm until 4pm. With the deaf group, 11am until midday, I worked with Hira prior to the group to see how we could incorporate her visual impairment accessibility within the project. I will be starting at 11am on Tuesdays to facilitate this. I returned home shortly after 6pm.
Grove House Primary School, Bradford, 10 a.m. until 10:40 a.m. Returned home prior to 1 p.m. Ventured out for a run this afternoon. This evening I had a burlesque chair class with Aurora Nova at DSL, 7:25 p.m. until 8:30 p.m. Home for 11 p.m. A good day spent riding the roller coasters at Blackpool Pleasure Beach, particularly the big one. A pleasant but slightly briskly day. I am spending tonight relaxing in my room at the Maydene Hotel after a highly creative but busy week. Breakfast downstairs in the dining room. Another good day riding the roller coasters at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. The park was quiet. I was home for 8:55 p.m. Mark picked me up from the media centre in Huddersfield. I experienced symptoms of exhaustion prior to bed, heavy head and loss of appetite. Bed early. I facilitated the animation workshop based at the BTM Centre in Bradford, 10:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. A shift at Yorkshire Dance with Sue, 3:45 p.m. until 9:15 p.m. Gravitating stress throughout the day due to life situations. Quite tired due to previous busy week. No group today at the BTM Centre in Bradford. Alternatively, I spent my time, 10 a.m. until 4 p.m, editing with Deaf Group's animation. Conversation of the further workshop sessions from January to March for me next year. This evening, I screened the music video animation Black Hole by Miles and the Chain Gang during the second half of Showroom Shorts based at the Showroom Cinema in Sheffield. Rob Speranza invited each of us filmmakers up to introduce our films live prior to the programme being played. A good vary of eclectic films. I arrived back into Huddersfield shortly before midnight. Mark picked me up from outside the media centre with Penny. Bitterly cold this evening. This evening, I performed 4 of my anecdotes, including A Biscuit or Two and My Brain Has Turned to Dust, based at the Northern Quarter Open Mic in Huddersfield. I arrived at a very empty venue at 6:30 p.m. Quite busy as the evening progressed. Good to see Rue Sawar and to hear a varied array of musicians. I had enough by 10:10 p.m. A male musician commemorated my set with a huge hug outside. Mark picked me up at the media centre. We was home by 10:25 p.m. I worked an 8:25 a.m. until 2:30 p.m. shift at Yorkshire Dance. Me and Mark checked into the lovely Knaresborough Inn shortly after 3:30 p.m. Once I dropped my spinning office chair and a suitcase at the Palace Park Social Club Knaresborough for this evening's edition of Oh My Cabaret, organised by the wonderful Autumn Oh My Days and hosted by the extravagant William Deep. I performed both of my Hattie burlesque acts, The Ride of Her Life and Cheeky Chaplain, to an inspired, thriving audience. This evening's bill was booked with such incredible performers, such as Profanity Pinup, Anita Dance, Foxy Gingerella, and many more, outshining their own infectious, sultry artist and merit. David, an avid fanatic audience member of Burlesque, was present tonight. He works in a factory during the day, and then attends burlesque events up and down the country religiously. He's lovely and harmless. The event commenced at 8 p.m, concluding shortly before 11 p.m. A lovely evening. I gave Anita Dance a copy of my second published art book too. Returned to the hotel shortly before midnight with a takeout. Huge love and admiration to Mark, who came home to support me tonight. Lounging naked now on the bed with a cup of Baileys, inputting this journal entry. A rainy day in Knaresborough, autumnal. Breakfast in the inn's dining room. We had a couple of hours' glance around the town, brief visit to the castle ruins, and then a drink at Cafe Nero. Returned to the Huddersfield shortly after 1 p.m. to collect Penny from Danny's house after dropping off a spinning office chair that I borrowed from Yorkshire Dance. A few hours sleep late afternoon. I arrived into Blackpool North at 10:25 a.m, catching the tram to the pleasure beach for a day of riding the roller coasters in the autumnal sun. Repeated rides on the big one. A rather camp middle-aged man tram conductor fancied himself as a comedian with his witty, clever punchlines with innuendo puns. He jokingly stated that his female friend, whom also worked on the tram, used to work in the Pleasure Beach. She was one of the rides, he laughed, as we all did too. I had a Danish dog. I took her home and discovered she was a Rottweiler, he laughed, picking up on the change of mood of the pedigree. He had perfect comedy. I rode the 170-foot sky coaster swinging bungee on the South Pier during a break away from the Pleasure Beach. An incredible experience. I checked into the Maideen Hotel shortly after 5 p.m. Rachel showed me and her male friend Cammy around the empty adjacent hotel, which is being refurbished. Rachel poured me a Bailey whilst briefly socialising with her and Chris and two of their friends. The conversation was brimming with sexual innuendos, just like my sordid imagination, if you like. Spent the evening with Jenny and family. I returned to the Maideen Hotel at 10:45 p.m. Another good day spent at Blackpool Pleasure Beach. The weather was pleasant, but rained during the afternoon and bitterly cold. A couple of rainy rides on the big one, and a slight night ride too. Returned to Huddersfield shortly before 10 p.m, changing train services at Manchester Piccadilly. I returned to the Pleasure Beach for the final day of the season on Saturday the 30th of November 2024, managing a few daytime and a night ride on the big one. The park was quite busy. I had a ride on the Revolution too. I didn't stay for the fireworks as I had to catch the 5:56 p.m. train service back to Huddersfield, changing at Preston and Manchester Piccadilly. Here is to the 2025 season. A lovely intimate audience at the Bradford Open Mic-based City Library, hosted by Mohammed Salou and Kevin Flaherty. Good to see familiar poets in attendance like Nicky Ray and the Warrior Queen, who performed poems about personal domestic violence experiences and Fruit Looms. I performed 4 anecdotes, including My Brain Has Turned to Dust, Monobrow, and premiering Alicante, Here We Come. The event commenced at 7 p.m. and concluded at 9 p.m. I returned home for 10:30 p.m. Mark picked me up outside of the media centre with Penny in Huddersfield. I arrived into London Victoria by coach shortly before 2:30 p.m, subsequently making my way to the Gunnersbury pub by the Tube to drop my belongings off for this evening's edition of Infinities, based downstairs. I met Azara Sapphire at the nearby Packhorse and Talbot pub for a bite to eat. It was great to see Azara again, whom presented a brilliant performance this evening at Infinities with her act Becoming Azara. Lovely to also see and be on the same bill as Ginger Blossom, whom won this evening's heat. I was the third performer during the first half to perform my act, Cheeky Chaplain, to the intimate audience when the host, Victoria Kember, welcomed me to the floor. I had a brilliant time as always at Infinities, and to meet a bunch of kindred souls backstage, both from here, the UK and Italy. Very chuffed that I was awarded the runner-up with my act this evening, and extremely grateful for the support. A little bump and grind dance action backstage with the Ginger Blossom during the second interval. I caught the midnight coach back to Huddersfield, arriving into the northern town shortly before 7 a.m, home for 7:20 a.m. 12 noon until 2 p.m, Jack and Ori based upstairs in the Boogie Woogie Beagle Bar Wakefield, hosted by Halima Mayat. Good to see and hear familiar and new poets read. I opened up the second half with a selection of my animations, such as Joy de Vivre and a live recital of My Brain Has Turned to Dust. A Canadian poet named Jeff Cottrell concluded the event with his performance poetry. I caught the bus to Pinderfields Hospital to see my grandma. I became incredibly emotional, seeing her bedridden due to a minor stroke and the deterioration of her Alzheimer's. She was admitted into hospital on Monday due to sepsis, but she is recovering. She won't be able to walk again. A bed has been placed in the living room at her home in the same manner as my great-grandma Gertrude, who died from Alzheimer's on Mother's Day in 2008. Knowing Grandma as she was when growing up was a shock to see her now. It's a fucking horrible disease. Jenny and Grandad came to the hospital subsequently, as we stopped until 6 p.m. I returned home for 7:30 p.m. An experimental further clip, Dancer 2.0, inspired also from my miscellaneous sketchbook, I began this afternoon. I used the same animation technique as recorded above, the theme depicting heartbreak and oppressive possession. I needed to be productive on my quiet day and not allow my artistry to become rustic. I based myself up in my art room 11:30 a.m. until 4:30 p.m. Animation complete. Renamed Dancer 2.0 / Heartbreak. Late Friday the 15th of November 2024. Cryptic vocals and an eerie foreboding free royalty score merged to the clip to create an ambience feel. The visual opening saw my hand rapidly sketching out the introductory ink sketch of a woman sat on a chair holding a letter. Her spouse stood behind her, hand on her shoulder. Quite a productive 2 days, considering my depression uprooting last night, and having ideations of not wanting to be compatible in any form of relationship with Mark. Heinous feelings of lethargy and doubt. This subsided late afternoon today. I arrived into Saltaire at 5 p.m. via train from Huddersfield, changing at Leeds and then Shipley, typical train cancellations. Congested train from Leeds to Shipley. Anyhow, I made it to the Caroline Street Social Club for this evening's edition of Salt and Shake, hosted by the wonderful Anita Dance and stage kitten Bazza. I was the second act as Hattie to perform my cheeky Chaplin act to a sold-out enthusiastic audience. I soaked up the atmosphere as I roller skated onto the stage with a loud cheering unison from the crowd. Great to see familiar and new artists on this evening's bill, including Arabella Twist, Trixie Blue, and Foo Foo Kaboom, whom expressed their own sultry and comedic merit to spectators. A huge thank you to Mark, Sam, Loxie, Alex and Bunny von Battenberg, who came along to support me. Great to see Mrs. Overalls in the interval too. A lovely titillation burlesque showcase. Arrived home with Mark at 10:20 p.m. No BTM centre in Bradford today due to snow. This evening I performed my anecdotes, My Brain Has Turned to Dust, A Biscuit or Two, and Alicante, Here We Come, at Listen Up Open Mic Night based at Left Bank Arts in Leeds, 7 p.m. until 9:15 p.m. Good to hear familiar and new acoustic musicians expressing their artistry in the beautiful charismatic church setting, dimly lit to create an intimate ambience. A poet, I'm forgetting his name, concluded the event with his fuck you and society and to accept people's individuality poetry. I befriended a mature man named Graham Short, whom attended the event as an audience member. He kindly gave me a lift to near the Leeds train station. The weather is bitterly cold. Rail replacement bus back to Huddersfield. Animation workshop at the BTM Centre in Bradford with the deaf group, 11 a.m. until 4 p.m. Commenced work on a feedback video in reference to the previous project we was working on. I had to buy a new phone after the session due to a default with my older mechanism. This evening I performed my anecdotes, A Biscuit or Two, and My Brain Has Turned to Dust at a lovely little open mic event named Space Poetic, upstairs in the Terrace, Northern Quarter, Manchester, 6:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. An intimate setting. I briefly networked with a fellow female mature poet named Linda Doan post-event, whom had a couple of canvas artworks on show in the window. Good to hear new poets too. Return to Huddersfield on the 8:58 p.m. Transpennine Express service from Manchester Piccadilly. I arrived into London, Victoria at 6 p.m, making my way to the Raincoal Bar in Soho for this evening's event of rock and roll cabaret, downstairs in the small venue.
Lovely to see Madam Crumpet again, who is the founder of this interesting but wacky showcase, extremely alternative, which I loved. The backstage dressing room was incredibly tight. I performed my cheeky Chaplin act during the first half, often using the fitted pole centre on the small stage to incorporate with my routine. It was a pleasure. Some mesmerising performances followed, including a sultry chair and pole routine from Stinging Pistol, doting bejeweled lingerie. A little dancing achieved during the punk rock band Bona Ray's set too. Brilliant to watch an exotic belly dancer named Helena de Joet deliver a mystical, provocative number, also caressing the stage pole to an alternative rock number. I would love to return to this event again, maybe with a little freestyling number. I bidded farewell to everyone when the event concluded at 10:30 p.m, making my way to London Victoria coach station for my slightly delayed National Express coach service at midnight back to Huddersfield. I arrived home shortly after 7:30 a.m. on the following morning. I've got a slight cold too. Commencing at 8 p.m. was this evening's edition of the Incredibles Burlesque Showcase, staged at the Swillington Social Club, South Leeds, hosted by Mrs. No Overalls and produced by Ivy Jack and the Incredible Charity. The charity is a wonderful support and celebration of women who have survived cancer but underwent a mastectomy, owning these gorgeous tattoos as an empowerment of winning the conflict where the breasts once were. The Incredibles concluded the showcase with a burlesque number accompanied by live vocals to Fucking Perfect by Pink, bearing their beautiful tattoos with euphoric tassels. Incredible performers graced the stage this evening, including Luna Winter, Purple Hurricane, and Ivy Jack. I performed my act, Cheeky Chaplin, during the second half, skating onto the stage as a prolific Charlie Chaplin before completing my routine. As always, I soaked up the experience with the stage lighting beaming back at me. Great to see Azara Sophia, who donated her support, and to Ruth, Foxy Magneta, who stage kittened and kindly gave me a lift back home with her partner Simon post-show. Still feeling quite under the weather, but I managed to channel my energy and dedication into my performance. Home shortly after midnight. I commuted Huddersfield to Brighton by train at 10:54 p.m, changing at Manchester Piccadilly, London Euston, London Victoria, arriving into the southern coast shortly after 4 p.m. I eventually checked into the Colston House Hotel after a mishap direction guide due to the typical fucking Google navigation app. Rain on and off tonight. This evening, I performed my cheeky Chaplin act at the Caroline of Brunswick's Cabaret Lab, taking place upstairs in an intimate setting. Even though I'm still not well, I channeled through my energy and delivered my best. Great to see fellow performers of burlesque, comedy, and music express their artistry in front of a small but enthusiastic audience. Trans burlesque artist Merlin the Grey concluded the event shortly before 10:30 p.m. with a reversed striptease and a smutty but clever take on Lily Allen's track Not Fair, bridged with male and females' provocative sexual moans to dress the cover with comedy. He doted his Adam Lambert-esque flair. Great to meet the co-founder and host Jack, who mentioned that I am most welcome to come back and perform sometime in the future. I visited this venue back in 2012 when I screened my experimental short film His Haunted Laughter at an event named Movie Bar, so it was good to return. I arrived back at the hotel at 11 p.m. I couldn't wait to just relax, nude in bed, which I did. Liberating. This afternoon, I performed my anecdotes, monobrow, and the day my gran rode a roller coaster at Poets Talking Bollocks event, the Chemic Tavern in Leeds, hosted by Keith Fenton, 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. Poet Stevie Turner drove me back home to Huddersfield. Good to hear Stevie recite a poem too. Quite a steady morning.
This evening, 6 p.m. until 8 p.m, I facilitated my very first burlesque workshop based downstairs in the hall at Swarthmore House, Leeds. Around 8 beautiful ladies attended, ranging from various ages, to learn the basic art of burlesque, chair tricks, catwalk strides, and the routine to my freestyling, sultry choreo of vaudeville clown, dressed in heels, my long white wedding gown, black mankini, and jockstraps, in which I performed as a demonstration. The group quickly picked up a choreo, celebrating female empowerment in all their glory and allowing liberation to behold. We had a cheeky laugh with plenty of smirky, smutty innuendos throughout the session. A beautiful evening. I had a ride on the 120-foot Starflyer attraction based in Millennium Square in Leeds before Mark and Danny picked me up outside the Wardroom Bar at 9 p.m. Home for 9:45 p.m. 7:30 p.m. till 8:45 p.m. at the Navigation Tavern, Murfield, Dead Chuff Poets, based in an open public room. A group of lads settled into conversation behind our casual poetry gathering, whom I subsequently realised was local indie band The Slates. Family friend Mel's son, Jude, was a member, but he wasn't there. I performed 3 of my anecdotes, including a biscuit or 2. It was good to see Jane and Dave Sharp there and a few new faces. Another quiet day.
8 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. The Guillory, Mosley, open mic based in the public room of a spacious venue. Lovely to see you Shiku again, whom hosted the event too. I performed a bunch of my anecdotes after the small intermission, including a biscuit or 2 and Darling, I've Become a Naturist, to a very intimate crowd. The kind of event that people who was having a drink didn't expect there to be an event. They watched a little and then moved into a back room. Post-show, I heard from a poet of a poet being a suspected paedophile and was known to have assaulted a male. I won't name the poet, but they gave me a lift home. Quite shocking, really. You can't put your credence or faith in anyone. My mental health has been on and off recently, and feelings of isolation, though I am fine now. Home for 11 p.m.
This evening, I performed at my 78th and final gig of 2024. Exhale's a festive showcase based at the All Hallows Church in Leeds, a glorious venue. The event consisted of a 3-course meal prior to the showcase. The evening was hosted by the Santa-dressed Louis Fraser, variety of acts ranging from musicians to comedians and drag, expressing their artistry through topics of queer culture, neurodivergency and transitioning. I performed 3 of my anecdotes, including a biscuit or 2 and Darling, I've Become a Naturist, shortly before the interval, and my cheeky chaplain act as happy-go-lucky after the intermission. Such a supportive audience. The event commenced at 7:30 p.m, concluding at 10 p.m. I thank Exhale and Rainbow Junction for their invite for me to perform. It has been an incredible year showcasing my artistry nationally and internationally. Fucking awesome. Super chilly this evening. I caught the 10:35 p.m. train to Huddersfield, arriving at 11 p.m. Mark picked me up from the media centre with Penny. This afternoon I visited family in Batley. Lovely to see them. I want to take this opportunity to evaluate what a gorgeous year 2024 has been, having completed 78 gigs, being part of a National Literacy Trust, delivering workshops in West Yorkshire schools, publishing my second art book, The Vision of Storytelling, and making my international debut performance at the Sweet Finnish Burlesque Festival based in Finland. My mental health has risen, rooted and diluted, often with delusional thoughts, but I have managed to contain and retain any relapse. I personally feel that I have championed and succeeded in many ways possible and experienced life in every perspective than ever before. I am going to harness and absorb 2024 to carry on into 2025. Tomorrow night, I'll be flying to Belgium with Ryanair from Manchester Airport to visit Wallaby Theme Park on Wednesday. I'm looking forward to this trip. A steady day. I flew to Charleroi, Belgium from Manchester Airport on the 7:50 p.m. Ryanair flight, Terminal 3. 1 hour journey, Belgium being 1 hour time difference in front, arrival being 10:15 p.m. I checked into the nearby Ibis Budget Hotel, approximately 1 mile away, stopping in room 221 for this evening. Tomorrow night, I will be stopping at Le Manoir Marmont accommodation until Thursday, a couple of miles from Wallaby Theme Park. I have been on and off producing detailed, focused and imminent drawings in my sketchbooks through ink, pencil and charcoal mediums. Explorations illustrating my performances at various gigs, burlesque, sultry and personal ailments. It has been a positive direction and consistent activities to keep my imagination aware and to keep my practice alive. Anyhow, it is currently 11:50 p.m. I'm thinking about winding down for this evening.
I hiked over muddy farmers' fields to get to Fleury's train station, thanks to Google navigation, arriving at 10:15 a.m. An imminent ink sketch of the typical Belgian terrace building to pass time of my 11:04 a.m. arrival train to Wallaby Theme Park. I entered the park's entrance shortly before midday, decorated with Christmas elegance. The decorations looked beautiful after dark, lights beaming through twiggy trees and complementing the ride's exterior. I pretty much rode all of the thrilling attractions a good few times, making sure that I experienced everything during my first visit. The 252-foot Dalton Terror Drop Tower, reaching speeds of up to 62 miles an hour, was an incredible experience, and so was a rapid wooden roller coaster, Loop Garou, which I also had the opportunity of having a night ride on. I often felt slightly tearful due to the combination of melodic Christmas music and the cozy, beaming, festive illuminations that brought Wallaby to life. It's great to get on some roller coasters again to release my serotonin, even though I have ridden a couple of star-flying attractions in Yorkshire this month. I finished my evening off with a night ride on the Intamin mega coaster Condor, standing at 164 foot and reaching speeds of up to 70 miles an hour. With my arms held up in the air, I absorbed the ride in its unlit appearance, propelled through various airtime elements in darkness. What a ride to end this incredible year of 2024 on. I exited the carriage shortly before 6 p.m.